Spoiler alert. In this show, we talk about Ted Lasso and the show's characters. You know, those kind of leaders who make you feel so empowered that you can run through walls for them or take on the entire world. Those who show up authentically as themselves, even when it's hard. And that makes you feel braver too. That's the kind of leader we're talking to today. Sam Chandler is Director of Commercial Customer Enablement at Kustomer with a K. She is one of those rare human beings who can talk about business growth, personal brand, customer engagement, and employee retention all in one breath, and actually makes you want to listen to her all day long. Sam has been recognized as LinkedIn's top voice for customer retention and startups. She has built teams from the ground up and has developed teams in bigger companies. In today's conversation, we talk about some of my favorite topics, like what happens when you stop chasing approval and actually F the haters. What happens when suddenly your job is just another paycheck versus being part of something amazing that drives you, your passion, and because you have purpose and meaning in it. I am looking forward to have an amazing conversation with Sam Chandler. I'm your host, Kirsten Penalosa, and this is another episode of Big Boss Biscuits. Sam Chandler, welcome to Big Boss Biscuits. It's such an amazing opportunity to have you here with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to say I came prepared. I'm waving the Richmond flag. So very excited, very humbled to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
I have seen you speak multiple times. One of the many things I find so inspiring about you is your authenticity, and you advocate for owning your narrative, for being an authentic leader, and you talk about it very openly to encourage others to show up as their authentic selves. How does it tie into the show and your love for Ted Lasso?
So I can be nothing but authentic. It's apparently been ingrained in me from a very young age, for better or worse. Thanks, Mom. As leaders, we owe it to the people that look up to us to come in an authentic way. I didn't realize how important that was until actually it was around COVID. Weirdly enough, there were a number of folks that would come up to me and they would say, like, how are you showing up authentically? Tell me how you do this. And at first I was like, what are you talking about? Like, we can all do it. And I think that's around the time I just realized that it doesn't come as easily to some folks. And there's a fear of being seen and the fear of backlash. But the way I see it, leaders owe it to the people that look up to us, because there are a variety of ways that you can lead, that people can look up to you, that you can do a job and that you can succeed. And so if people only see one way, then we're, continuing to march to that status quo. And that is just so sad.
There are several moments in the show around Rebecca's character where she's preoccupied with the narratives around her in the press, and then very self-absorbed in her whole divorce settlement and comparing herself to Rupert, her ex-husband. Yet there's so many moments where people are looking up to her. Keely is one of them. She is inspired by Rebecca. Then there is Rebecca's goddaughter, who also says, like, wow, I always wanted to see the owner of a football club at work. And Rebecca asked, really always? She's like, well, ever since a woman is managing it.
Yep.
So what does mean to own your narrative and your authenticity as a leader and the workspace, especially when you have moments of adversity or challenges that you're dealing with?
Yeah. When I was watching that part of the Two Aces episode and Keely's telling Rebecca about old Bex, I was screaming at the screen, mainly because, like, if that were me, I just would have started laughing. Like, how awesome is it that you have an opportunity to kind of clap back, have a moment in the spotlight where everybody's waiting for you to have an answer? To me, that's power, that's influence. Think about all the ways that she could have had a lot of fun with that. Instead, like you mentioned, she's very preoccupied. I think that's a really great word. She's very preoccupied with, the divorce, but in a way that doesn't empower her. And I just sit there and I think, I'm like, gosh, all of the ways that she could have flipped that narrative and owned it and had so much fun and then shown Keely, shown her goddaughter, like, yeah, look, we can do this. And instead, you know, when she let other people own it for her, she made decisions that were detrimental to her and then also detrimental to the team. For example, she found out the press was calling her old Bex. Like, what fun you could have with that. I would have taken that and I would have made like a line of bourbon and I would have called it Old Beck's. And then the tagline would have said, everyone knows Beck's get better with time. Like something like that where she can just own it and she can tell everybody like, nah, you can't hurt me. And so watching her every time that there was like a setback, you could see her just kind of revert into herself. And that just made me so sad for her because there's so many opportunities to just own that narrative. It's so important.
Is there a real life moment where something like this happened to you or someone around you and where they were actually able to change the narrative around?
I think of public figures, and I'll talk about Kim Kardashian first, and then I'll bring it down to my own experiences here. But I think about how masterfully she owns her narrative. I've heard her say before she has made a lot of money off of being underestimated. I think she has a law degree. She's got a multi-billion-dollar business. And the number of times that, people have tried to make her the butt of the joke. And it cracks me up because every time you all do that, she makes $1 million. She knows what she's doing. She's leveraging this narrative that other people would shy away from and think like, this is so embarrassing. And instead she's like, wait, how can I play with this and come out the victor? I just think that is so great. So in myself, I think about all of the ways that apparently I cannot be embarrassed or shamed. I was a drama kid growing up. That's probably shocking to no one. To me, I didn't realize what power that was. And that's like the first step in owning your own voice and your narrative. I think about where that comes from, aside from apparently inheriting it from my mom. We had nothing growing up. I was the child of a single parent. She worked multiple jobs my whole life. We basically had to figure out another way to get there. And like I had to be creative in what I was doing. And the number of times that, through the years, someone has assumed that I won't be able to do it. Because statistically, I shouldn't be here talking to you. I shouldn't be a college graduate. I shouldn't have the role that I have. None of this should be possible. And so I think about all of the times when I was young, I don't think I understood what was happening when someone would disregard that I was going to be in the picture. And then as I got older, it got really fun because I realized that disrespect is a gift. And it only impacts me so much to have somebody say, you can't do that. Okay. I move on and then we do it. I've come to really appreciate that kind of feeling, that kind of high.
I wish I had known you 13 years ago. When I came to the US, I was insecure because I entered
Yeah.
a workplace and workspace that I had never been before, in a culture I had never lived before. And so there I was, the German, half Mexican, not knowing how to communicate, how to show up as me. I didn't even know what my authentic self was supposed to be. I carried those insecurities into my first leadership roles, and so I think about what you just said that there's just so much power in owning your story. When you think about especially women in leadership, younger women entering the workspace, what would be the best advice you could give them other than be your authentic self?
I love all of the points that you've brought up in your writings and then in your presentations where you bring that to light. Sometimes it's time for me to be out there in the front and guiding people because that's what the group needs. Other times it's time for me to step back and let somebody else shine. And so I think as leaders, it's so important to know when you need to do that and when to bring in others. So I would say, especially for female leaders, it's gonna suck sometimes. You can't. I found for me, it can't be docile, or at least maybe that's just not who I am. I try to come in with the best answer. I try to be like the best person in the room to solve the problem, bring data with me, and be open and have a growth mindset. And part of that, authenticity is also allowing other people to join in on that. Like I said, having a growth mindset and always being curious and understanding every part of the business and bringing in other people. When other people feel seen and heard, that is when you open up this really magical connection between teams and groups. So I would say, like, specifically for leaders, making sure that you're bringing them in, not just mentoring, but also being a sponsor, saying their names when they're not in the room, so that people understand all of the goodness that they're bringing in.
My goodness, you mentioned one word that so many leaders don't even know what it means. And it's really interesting. In the past few years, whenever I stepped into a new work environment, they didn't understand what sponsoring meant. It's such an important component and aspect of being a good leader. I feel that eventually Rebecca, once she doesn't allow others to own her narrative, once she owns her own story and her own everything, her authenticity. You can see the shift in how she goes
Correct.
about helping Keely. And Keely, on the other
Exactly.
hand, stands almost in contrast because Keely has an interesting story herself of not being like a traditional corporate woman, and yet she brings a lot of corporate success to the world with her own company eventually. But then, there's like stories about, I'm not going to go too much in detail, but that where haters start to bring her down. And she could have been docile, like you said, and ducked and apologized for who she was in the past. And then she said, like, why would I? This is who I am. I didn't do anything wrong. And so despite having all the success around her and a support system like Rebecca, there's still going to be the haters. What do we do with the haters?
Let me start by saying I love Keely's story arc, and I love that dynamic between her and Rebecca because it does so beautifully represent what you just said. Keely is not the corporate type. She's not someone that you would see usually in that position. In the two Aces episode, there's that point where she said at the end, "Fuck the haters." That's all I gotta say. And, like, I will tell you, it's easy to say. So many of us are people pleasers, and it's so difficult to think somebody doesn't like you. If you think about it, and I know that you've been in rooms where this has happened before, think about all of the times where a problem could have been solved so easily. And so often, because we don't want to hurt feelings or we don't want to get yelled at or we don't want to have somebody freak out, mainly just because we're conflict averse, we just let it simmer and then it gets worse. And the conflict builds and builds. Usually, something that really wasn't that big of a deal becomes a big deal because we let it fester. And so for me, there's the mentality of I don't care what people think about me, which is important because that impacts the decisions that you make. On the flip side, you do have to have a group around you. My husband calls it his advisory board. So just people that you've collected throughout the years who have an opinion that you trust. And that is what a lot of executives lose along the way, especially the more money and power and status you get, because everybody just wants to be close to, you, and they continue to say yes. And so for me, I try to gauge, how much I trust and respect the opinion of the person that is talking. I try to realize, especially in this day and age where so much of this is done behind a keyboard, where is that person coming from? Why are they saying it? What are they bringing into this conversation? Is this about me or is this about something else? Over the years, I've tried to step back from the situation and understand what is this really about? And is this feedback that I should step away from and just say, okay, that's fine? Is it feedback that I should really think about? Am I not taking someone else's feelings into account? Am I just being an asshole? Because that's possible. And then I try to recalibrate them. So, yeah, for the most part, haters gonna hate, and you have to decide which of that feedback you're gonna take.
It reminds me of a saying I picked up in a Buddhist text somewhere. It's essentially, if the feedback is true, why are you getting upset? It's true.
Exactly.
And if the feedback is not
Exactly.
true, why are you getting upset? It's not true. So either way, it's on you how on you to decide how and what you take from there, and then kind of discern and make healthy decisions about what is useful and what is not.
Absolutely. I had a team member, Bobby Rose Riblet, shout out, and she always had this amazing artist mentality. She taught me take feedback that you decide to take on your art, your work, and then others you decide not to, and you say thank you for the feedback and you keep it moving. So very similar to that quote. That is someone's opinion. If you believe that it can help you, fantastic. If you don't, okay. There's only so much that we can do to, impact that.
I agree. And you also said something very important. Is it an opinion or is it actionable feedback? If it's just an opinion, it's easy to say, ah, whatever, it's your opinion and you're entitled to your opinion. I don't have to take it, right? Versus there's
Absolutely.
something concrete I can do about it. I just had another session recorded, and after the session, my guest said, why do you say biscuits? It threw me off. I didn't even realize I say it in any particular way. I just thought that's
That
how you pronounce it, like me being English non-native speaker. And I'm like,
I love that.
I don't know. It's like I have an accent, I guess. He's like, why? And so I asked him like, why? He's like, well, it's because it's pronounced biscuits. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you, and it hurt me in a way. Probably because, it just it just threw me off. At the same time, I'm like, well, how else am I going to improve my pronunciation or whatever else? You can apply this kind of example to anything if no one points it out to me. And
It's
so at the end, I'm like, okay, in a way, my ego was hurt, but he didn't give me an opinion about my pronunciation. He asked me a question and I was allowed to take it, not take it. And then I said, like, okay, moving forward, I'm going to pronounce it correctly.
honestly, if we can all understand one another, then who cares? So to me, I'm like, does it matter? When I'm giving feedback, I'm like, does it genuinely matter? Is this going to improve? So I can see from your perspective, you're like, no, it did improve.
Another thing that you do as a leader, as a director and leading teams, but also throughout your career is looking at engagement, particularly in your current role with customer engagement, but it can also translate to employee engagement. And you have good and strong opinions that I would love to hear about why employee engagement matters and what to do when you just lose passion for your job, or maybe you have someone who is just there for the paycheck.
Something I frequently talk about is the fact that jobs are transactional. That's either good or bad, but jobs are transactional. It is an agreement with a company and a person to do a specific task and receive currency for that. Hey, that's okay. I always tell leaders jobs are transactional unless you make it something else. I don't have any kind of judgment call when I say that. That's okay. If you want to come to work for a paycheck, and you are doing all of the things that the company needs from you, you're hitting your marks, that's okay. Your motivation then is just different. I think about Jamie and Danny Rojas. They perfectly exemplify these two ideas that we tend to think of in our team members. Jamie, who literally was just there for paycheck. He's like, I'm not even suiting up for practice. And then you have Danny Rojas, who is like, yes, whatever, football is life. This is amazing. And so, there's pros and cons to both of these approaches. And what I loved what Ted did, he made Jamie find another reason to be there. And it kind of made me think of a concept of storming, forming, forming, performing.
Yes.
Kind of me of because he was at this point where he needed everybody on the team to row in the same direction. He needed everybody to understand we're here for each other, we're supporting each other, and like we're going in this way. And so Jamie, up to this point, he had been the star. It had just been a one-man show, and to him it was transactional because he had kind of let all of these other elements drop off. If that was bringing him joy, cool. The problem though, especially for a coach, is like there's not just a one person football team. So, for him, he has to figure out as a leader, how do I bring him back into the fold? And that was a much different way to engage Jamie than it was Danny Rojas. There's pros and cons to realizing that you're putting in units of effort into the relationship and you expect the company to put in units of effort, and that's fine. I've also seen on the flip side people that regardless of what role they're in, they celebrate it. That is their life. They live, eat, breathe that. And, there's a benefit to that. Sometimes that's felt as, oh, this is the way that we should always be in every single job. And the concern that I have is that sometimes that gets taken advantage of by a boss or a company or whatever the case may be. My hope is that all of the team members that I manage, in some shape, way, or form, I hope that they have that same joy in something they do.
But when I think about the jobs that I had where I was just there for the paycheck, long term, I was miserable. Even if there is the understanding that it is a transaction, I couldn't stay in those jobs for longer. There was always a moment of rupture where I'm like, I can't, I just can't. I can't just show up and fake that I'm liking this, even if I was a good performer, even if I knew I could do it. So how do you navigate that? Either if you are in a position where you're just there for the paycheck, which is valid, but you still have to show up. But Jamie
Yeah.
wasn't showing up. So it was impacting his team members and morale was low. And that's so real for like corporate or office environments. If you have a high performer who just doesn't show up because he or she is performing well, but then also they don't adhere to the same standards and they still get paid, what's the incentive for the others?
It's such a good point. What I oftentimes realize is that sometimes we don't actually say what the standard is. Like, think about all of the times where you've had a leader, like, and the feedback they give you is so vague. You're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like this is nothing I can action. And so people will come into this role with a variety of baggage. So for somebody, it might be that they're a high performer and that they're just not being challenged anymore. That's a completely different, issue than a low performer who maybe has just said, screw it. I don't understand how I can improve. Maybe they're not getting good feedback, but it's up to leaders to understand what the difference is. Have they given the feedback? Has it been clear? And then, what do you do after that? Like, do you let it linger? Do you do something about it? And then what do you do after that? So if it's a high performer, then is it time for them to move to the next S curve? Are you just keeping them there? Are you contributing to that? And not necessarily intentionally, but if they're your star player, are you keeping them there because it's easy for you? And you're not challenging them because if you do and then they leave, then oh crap. And then you either have to bring the others to the occasion or you've got to figure out how to work somebody else into the team. With Ted, he took a star player out of the game. That was a bold move there. I don't see many leaders that do that, but like look at what he was able to do by kind of shaking him and saying like, no, this is not acceptable. You might be doing these parts of the job well, but I need you to do this too. And it seemed like it got through to him.
I love that part. And my husband and I, when we were watching that episode, he's like, why would you do that as a leader? Why? And it makes perfect sense because Ted is realizing the negative impact that Jamie's solo player behavior is having on the rest of the team. No one was celebrating with Jamie his successes, his goals. I've seen that in real life in work environments. One time I had to part ways with my top performer. It was a manager on my team and the impact of their behavior was just so negative and toxic, even if they're performing at their highest. And once I part ways with that person, the whole environment just ballooned because you took out the unhealthy component for the rest of the team to thrive. I think the challenge that I see leaders facing, especially nowadays, where there's a lot of job insecurity. So people are more cautious to leave their job. And so many of them opt into staying where they are, even if they're unhappy. What should what should we advise and encourage leaders to do, knowing that there are team members that are I had one of them who just told me, I'm not going to look for another job even if I know I should because I need this job. I need the paycheck. I empathize with them and I also needed them to show up as their best.
First off, the fact that a team member told you that outright, to me, that speaks to the trust that you have developed with them. Because think about all the times that team member blurts it out of the blue, and you're like, "Oh, I didn't even know that you were looking for something." To me, that speaks to the trust of regardless of whether it's in this role, that person knows that you're going to be in their life, and that's awesome. When I'm thinking of jobs being transactional, this is what I'm talking about. So yeah, the job is the job. They see it one way, whatever. But like that relationship that they have with you, Kirsten, like you did it. But yeah, on the flip side of it, you owe it to the rest of the team. Like you have to get the job done. It's okay that they're like, this doesn't bring me joy. It's not fulfilling anymore. If they're still able to do the job, they hit the marks and they're showing up every day. Okay, that's fine. It's those times when those performers are just letting it slip and you know that they don't want to be there, then it becomes an issue. I know the job market's crazy. I know that, you don't want to go look for a job, but this is what this role requires. So if you don't want to do that, like, what do we do now? So that's another conversation. But, you know, it coincides with knowing yourself, knowing your personal brand. Going back to Rebecca's struggles of not realizing how much power she actually did have. It's kind of an ideological societal norm to think at least in the US. I am this job. This job defines me. This company defines me. And if I don't have joy in this singular role, then I'm screwed and I'm going to be unhappy. And what I found is when I flipped my own thinking and what if I explored these other facets of my personal brand or other ways that I could find fulfillment? If that person doesn't want to leave because they recognize the personal things in their own life that prevent them from doing that, okay, well, then go find another outlet to help or inspire or just something to bring you joy so that you can bring that into all of the facets of your life.
I would also say that, especially now when we have people who decide to stay in a job because they need the paycheck rather than because they're passionate about it, I very much lean into the developing part of them and encourage them to think into the future. What would you like to do instead? And how can you leverage this job right now to build the skill set or just gain certain knowledge and experience that can help you in the future?
Exactly.
So that's also the human centered leadership part that I really try to inspire in others.
Absolutely, because again, it's selfish to think that this person is going to stay in this role on this team for the rest of their lives. That's not helping them grow. When I was an early, manager early in my career, I viewed people leading the team differently than I do now. And now it's like, oh, here's an opportunity for them to go and do the next cool thing they're going to do. It now becomes a thing where it's like, yeah, let me help you go find that cool thing. And then let's find somebody else that this is their next cool thing. And then we all just become a big, great community of people that can help each other out. So I think it's cool when that person that you helped do this thing connects with the next person coming in and then like they forge these bonds and then you're like, oh, I did
To wrap up, what you just said reminds me of what Leslie Higgins tells Keely when she goes down her own company and she's afraid to tell Rebecca. And I'm not sure if I'm going to quote it correctly, but along the lines of, don't worry, a good mentor will know that you will move on at some point. A great mentor expects it from you. And so
absolutely.
that's what I see in you, Sam. Whenever you engage with others, you build them up, you lift them up, you encourage them, and you celebrate having been a part of it in their journey.
You. Thank you. That means so much. There's so many people that don't realize how awesome they are and how many amazing things that they've actually brought to the world. I think some of that comes from the mentality that you have this job and it's your singular focus, that is that. If you just step out of that a little and you realize like, oh, this is the way I do this. And I do it differently than anybody else. Then you start thinking about the cool things that you bring to the table. And a lot of people don't realize like other people want to know that. And it's because they've not been placed in a position where somebody can hear that. So I feel like it's my obligation to pull awesome people onto the stage and show this cool thing that you did. Other people need to hear it so that other people know that they exist and can ask them for advice and get that flywheel going. That makes me so happy.
I could continue to converse for hours and hours. You are such an
Guys,
inspiration. I appreciate you being here today, sharing your authentic self, your story, your thoughts and ideas with others.
thank you. Thank you so much. I thank you for having this idea, putting it together, and for letting us all join in. I cannot wait to see who all is inspired by you.
Oh, thank you. That also means a lot. Thank you for listening to another episode of Big Boss Biscuits. To connect with Sam, check out her website, sam-chandler.com. You can also find her on LinkedIn under SA Chandler. If you liked this content, please share it, subscribe, or follow us on social media. Any support is highly appreciated. Until next time.